long time, blind people were only able to pursue a limited number of professions. Until the 19th century, they earned a living as brush makers or basket makers. They were excluded from the world of books and education. To bring their own thoughts or news to paper, one key thing was missing: a system of characters which they could read and write. All this was changed by 16-year-old Louis Braille. In 1825, he developed a system of writing that is still used by the blind all over the world today. Louis Braille was born on the 4th of January 1809 in Coupvray near Paris. At the age of 3, he injured his eye with a knife in his father's saddle-making workshop. An infection eventually spread to his healthy eye. Louis' sight gradually deteriorated. By the age of 5, he was completely blind. Despite his disability, Louis attended the village school. He learned the alphabet and multiplication tables, but he did not know what letters and numbers looked like. His teacher learned of a school for blind children in Paris. The school was free. For a long time, little interest was shown in the needs of the blind. In 1749, the French writer Denis Diderot wrote about their plight in his Letter on the Blind. He wanted something to be done at last to enable the blind to lead a more dignified life. Diderot's appeal moved the entire nation. Valentin Roy was the first person to take action. In 1785, he founded Europe's first school for the blind in Paris. Roy also developed the first system of writing for the blind. To produce relief print, he used an iron stylus to inscribe letters in mirror-inverted form onto thick paper. In this way, sighted and blind people were able to read and write these characters. This was a matter of particular importance to Roy. For educational reasons, he rejected the idea of a secret code which only blind people could understand. By the time Louis Braille joined the Paris School for the Blind in 1819, Roy's system had gained recognition. The school's new director, Dr. Pugnier, had even set up a library for his pupils, but only a few dozen books were produced in relief print. And these books were difficult to read, but inquisitive Louis soon knew them all. In 1821, former artillery officer Charles Barbier de la Serre visited the school for the blind in Paris. He showed the director a secret code which he'd developed himself a few years earlier. His code, consisting of raised dots, enabled soldiers to communicate in the dark. Barbier had developed a system of coordinates made up of 6 lines and 2 columns. Each of the 36 sounds in the French language was represented by a group of 2 to 12 dots. The dots were elevated. Barbier made his system available to the school. But while it was easy for him to scan a group of up to 12 dots with his eyes, the blind students had difficulty feeling the dots with the tip of their fingers. When they began to modify his system, Barbier was furious and left the school insulted. Louis then remembered a dice game his father had made especially for him some years earlier. The surface of the dice was flat. The dots, a maximum of 6, were elevated. Louis was able to encompass the small number of dots with his fingertip all at once. Bearing this in mind, he began studying Barbier's system in greater detail. After 2 years, Braille was ready. He came up with a system similar to a dice consisting of a maximum of 6 dots per character, which could be felt all at once with the tip of a finger. He arranged the dots in 2 columns, both consisting of 3 lines, a variable system with numerous possible combinations. Each letter was represented by a certain combination of dots. Louis decided to use the letters of the alphabet instead of sounds. He wanted his system to be based on the written rather than on the spoken language. Louis thought up a simple system of arranging the dots. For the letters A to J, he used the top 4 dots. For the letters K to T, he added the bottom left-hand dot to the first combination of dots, and for the remaining letters, he added the bottom right-hand dot. Louis gave the numbers 0 to 9 a prefix symbol and the respective combination of dots for the letters A to J. Because every dot is either raised or not raised, there are 64 possible combinations, enough for the alphabet and many special national characters.
J'ai développé un système qui se compose de 6 points.
Louis showed his system to the school director, who immediately recognized its significance. Unnoticed by his teachers, the 16-year-old had invented something that was about to revolutionize the lives of the blind. But Louis had more to offer. With his father's help, he developed a writing device and support frame. With Braille's inventions, the blind were now able to read and write by themselves.
Henri était paresseux.
Un instant, s'il te plaît.
Director Pignet was delighted. It was thanks to his untiring efforts that Louis Braille's system became famous. But it was many years before sighted people acknowledged the significance of the Braille system. The main objection was that only specially trained students could read the code, and that this would only serve to isolate the blind even further. It gradually became clear that Braille was the only way blind people could read and write quickly. In 1854, 2 years after Braille's death, his system was officially introduced in schools for the blind in France.
Non, vers le haut. Montre. Encore une fois.
Shortly after, the first Braille books were manually produced. News spread fast among the blind. Those who mastered the system now had access to the printed world. In 1878, Louis Braille's system was declared the official international writing system for the blind at a congress in Paris. A year later, the German Association of the Blind also adopted the system. For the German version of Braille, additional combination of dots were created for the letter W, which did not exist in the French alphabet, the umlaut letters A, O and U, and for the German scharfes S symbol. In the meantime, engineers and inventors also became interested in the dot code. At the end of the 19th century, the first writing machines for the blind were introduced onto the market. At around the same time, Oskar Picht developed the first punching and embossing machine to print books. But material costs were high because the dots had to be a certain size to be tactile. A solution was found in the first half of the 20th century in the form of a shorthand system. This more than halved the number of characters. The shorthand system saves space, but Braille books are still significantly thicker than books in normal print. Lord of the Rings in shorthand Braille, for example, covers 15 volumes. To produce a book for the blind, the text is scanned and translated by a special software system. The blind text is then corrected by a blind and a sighted proofreader.
Tanner stolpert in Richtung Straße und denkt, wenn das mit Absicht getan hätte, was?
The text is embossed onto a pressure plate in the embossing machine. The sheet is then clamped into the printing machine and the dotted code embossed onto the paper. The printed sheets are then ready for binding.
Überschriften und 115 Links. Link zum Inhalt. Überschrift Dossier Archiv. Überschrift elektrisiert.
Nowadays, Braille can also be used by blind people on a computer. Texts are typed with a Braille keyboard and read with a Braille line. The Braille line contains 6 pegs per character. Depending on dot combination, these pegs are elevated correspondingly. At the end of the line, the pegs are lowered again. Today, blind people all over the world use Braille in many hundreds of languages. Louis Braille didn't live to see the breakthrough of his invention. But as a teacher, he introduced many students to his system at the School for the Blind in Paris. And when he trained as an organist, he also developed a notation system for music. This opened up a new profession to blind people all over the world, many of whom have become very talented musicians. In 1852, at the age of 43, Louis Braille died in Paris of tuberculosis, from which he'd suffered for many years. He was buried in his hometown of Coupvray. In 1952, on the centenary of his death, Braille's body was ceremoniously reinterred in the Pantheon in Paris.